Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Run, Walk, Talk, Tales of Inclusion and Development. I'm Steph, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm here with Judy, and her pronouns are she and her. And today we have a special guest, Rebecca Hockin, who will speak to us about a very interesting topic, relationship intelligence. So, a big welcome, and thanks so much for joining, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with both of you.
Well, we're so excited to have you here today, and we wanted to start, as we always do, by sharing a little bit about our guest, Rebecca, and her bio. So, Rebecca is a commercial lawyer, and she's also an executive coach for lawyers. And as a lawyer, Rebecca loves working collaboratively with people across all areas of professional expertise to develop practical and creative solutions to legal and business issues. And as a coach, she's really passionate about helping her clients create fulfilling and sustainable careers. But she's more than her work. She's also a
Mhm.
wife, a mother, daughter, sister, friend, and community member. And I love this. She really makes a point of creating space in her life for exercise, music, reading, and meaningful connection. And she's here with us today, Steph, as you mentioned, to talk about a framework that she uses called relationship intelligence. Now, before we dive in, I did just want to share that Rebecca and I was thinking about this last night and I couldn't believe it, but we've known each other for, close to 20 years now.
Yeah.
And with our run, walk, and talk theme, Rebecca actually encouraged me to run it, I did my first half marathon with Rebecca. We trained together and then we didn't actually run it together. Rebecca's a little bit faster than me, which is why we don't run so much together. We tend to walk together now. But we ran the Good Life half marathon in Victoria, and that would have been
Mhm.
this month. I looked it up 12 years ago.
Mhm.
And Steph, the funny thing
Yes.
is, we weren't running yet together, but you were also, I believe, at that same half marathon.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also, I think, very shortly after Judy, you and I met. Okay, so why don't we sort of dive in? Let's find out, Rebecca, give us some background on relationship intelligence. What is it? How is it used? Why should we use it? All the things. Tell us.
All right. So relationship intelligence in the way that I'm using it is it's a research-based framework that's created by a company called Core Strengths. And it's a competency that's the idea that people can work together productively over time by understanding how their personalities align or maybe contrast with those of their colleagues. And specifically their motivations when things are going well and their motivations when they experience conflict or distress. And with this insight about their own personalities and also their colleagues' personalities, people can adjust how they approach each other to have better relationships, which also at work means better work product, better work results. And so those results might be productivity, also retention. Retention is a lot higher for people who have good relationships at work. Teams with good relationships trust each other more. They're more likely to commit to their work, maybe even devote some of that discretionary effort or time to their work, and then stay with the organization longer. Um, Also, and this is a personal passion of mine, when people trust each other, they're more willing to take thoughtful risks. So that means more innovation, more creativity, less of the just doing what's always been done because that's the way it's always been done, or having to fit into one model that's seen as the right way. So having those other perspectives. So relationship intelligence as a concept, it's a very robust system. There's a heavily researched assessment or psychometric instrument and an online platform. You can do all that, but that's not how I always use it. That's not how I approach it, and certainly not how I'm going to approach it today. I like to use it outside of the assessments and those rigorous details to talk about, well, what can I learn about my motivations and others' motivations that I can actually use later today or tomorrow. And so I think the best way, for people to start using it right away is to understand these two main things about relationship intelligence. And the first thing is that we are each motivated by our own blend of three different drivers. And that first driver or one driver is people, a drive to help others. The second driver is performance. and that's a drive to achieve results. And the third one is process, a drive to establish order. And so we each have our own blend. So maybe I'm 60% process, 20% performance, 20% people. That's just an example. Most people are more in one or the other. Some people are an even blend of all three. But the idea is that we all have our unique blend, and it's going to be different from someone else's, probably different from those we're working with. And that's the lens through which we see the world across areas, work, but also others. So for the sake of example, maybe I am more process oriented. Let's say, Judy, you're more people oriented. You're concerned with how you're treating people around you. You tend to be supportive and trusting. Not to say other people aren't, it's just that's the primary driver. And Steph, let's say you're more performance oriented. So about action, you feel best when you're accomplishing tasks efficiently and achieving meaningful results. I'm seeing some nods, so maybe we're
me.
onto something.
Efficiency is important.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then if I'm process oriented, I'm thinking things through, kind of more methodical, more systematic. So those are the drivers. And then the second thing is that we have these drivers, and they're stable across areas of life. But our behaviors can be different. We don't have to be driven by these drivers and preferences to choose behaviors that look exactly like them, right? These are our preferred ways of viewing the world, but we can actually choose behaviors or approaches that look different so we can meet other people with different perspectives and different drivers where they're at. And we can have a more respectful relationship where we see where people are coming from. We work better together, and then ultimately collaborate more efficiently with less friction. Conflict is inevitable, but less friction that slows things down and creates those problems that then we have to deal with instead of the work that we're trying to do. But we all struggle with working with people with different personalities, right? This is the thing for everyone. And if we use behaviors that work better for the people we're working with, for the situation that we're working on, we're actually developing tools in our toolkit, our strengths that we can use. So it sees strengths as a different from talents. So a lot of the strength stuff out there is, you rely on these strengths and then go for it. And this more sees strengths as things we can build, just like strength in the gym or when we're running, right? The leg strength to carry us, it takes time. We don't just, some strengths we might have naturally, but then we can develop them and build them so that they're ready to use when we need them. So I may be less likely or less strong in, a strength, like an assertive strength, but I'm going to need it sometimes. And so I'm going to develop it and use it. And that's really the idea, is that we can actually grow and develop and use behaviors for that aren't necessarily our go-to, but produce better relationships and then ultimately better work results.
Well, I love that. And I think there's a few different things that I'm hearing about this, and that there's the self-awareness for each of us, because this helps develop a self-awareness of where are my
Yes.
strengths and where might I need to develop and grow. But then I also really like that it's considering the other person and giving you tools to maybe analyze, because I could see where the process people and I could see where some of those conflicts, like if you're really concerned about the people and you're maybe not the process, but what was the
Performance.
staff? The performance, like you're going to be like coming up because one person's really concerned about making sure everybody's okay, and the other person's like, let's just keep driving everybody to get to the results. You can see where, and there can be a misunderstanding, because I might think if somebody whose performance, I might be like, oh, they don't care about people, when that it's not the case. They're just really focused on results, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's both self-awareness and other awareness. And we learn about those two types of awareness through the other. It's very interactive.
Well, I like that. And I think it leads nicely into the next question for you, because we're thinking a lot, Steph and I, on the learning and dev side about, how do we, especially now in learning and development, there's so much talk about core skills. And I think there's core skills likely to this, but there's probably a knowledge element too. Like, what core skills or knowledge does this relationship intelligence model, what are we aiming to develop in individuals?
Definitely the empathy and perspective taking. I think that's huge in this. The ability to understand that how how we ourselves are motivated, our personalities, but then that others how others are motivated, and that they're different, and that that's okay, and there isn't one right way for for lawyers. It's not like you have to be process oriented, right? There isn't one way. There's value in all these different ways. So yeah, that ability to take someone else's perspective. And then the now what piece is to develop a more inclusive communication style. So meeting people where they're at, showing that we understand and care for them, and um, can come to where they're at, and then hopefully they'll do the same for us. And again, it's a more reciprocal, interactive way of communicating with people. If someone's not going to read a 10-page memo, I'm not sending them a 10-page memo. I might say, if you need it, let me know. But if they're performance oriented, I'm not sending them the 10-page email, right? It's like, here are the top 3 points. Let's have a call to discuss. So meeting people where they're at. Yeah.
Oh, I like that practical element.
Yes.
Steph, I'm sure
Yeah.
you're liking that too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
like those practical tips.
Well, and it's that knowing that style almost,
Yeah.
right? It's, you've sort of touched a little bit upon this. Sorry, Rebecca, were you going to say something else? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the other piece is around that growth mindset. The idea that we don't have to do things the way we've always done them, or just because we have, a particular preference for something,
Yeah.
that we can develop like strengths. It doesn't have to be that we're just born with them and we leverage them as far as we can. We can actually develop, and there's a lot of satisfaction in that, being able to try something new and grow and work with it and experiment, and then see, oh, that really worked well.
Yeah.
It's freeing, I think,
Yes.
for people
Yeah.
to know that you're not boxed into a particular way of being. Like, just because I do this assessment and I'm a process person, that doesn't mean that's it. Like, that's who I'm always going to be. I can change and
Yeah.
grow over time, as you're saying.
Yes.
Well, so what's also coming up for me is this sort of, thinking about kind of this being and staying authentic. And so I'm curious, Rebecca, like, how does this methodology allow individuals to remain authentic while building stronger relationships?
Yes, I love this question. I'm so glad you asked it, because it is something that I think comes up when you first hear about this model, or when I do. It's like, oh, so I have to change my behaviors to adapt to the other person. Like, now I'm gonna, that's not honestly me. But what I really like about this model is it really just gives you options. It says there are all these different strengths or behaviors that you can choose to use to work better with others. It's going to be more productive for the relationship, but you can actually do it for a reason that makes sense for your motivational value system. And so I'll give you an example. If I'm process oriented, and let's say we're working on rolling out a program together, and we have a meeting and the deadline's getting close, and there have been some challenges, and we're approaching that meeting, and I really want things to go well, and I might want to get through my 347 item checklist, right, and like go through methodically. But Judy is really people oriented, and I know that about her. And so I might actually start the meeting and say, like, check in with everyone, instead of saying item one, and going there. It's like, what if I check in with everyone? And I'm checking in with everyone because I know that's important to Judy, and see how people are doing. But I also, as a process person, know someone's going to have to do all this stuff on my checklist, right? We have this end result we're working towards. And so the people are part of the process. And if I want to get through my process, I've got to attend to the people. So we do it for reasons. I'm using a more supportive, more helpful, more people-oriented behavior because I know it's going to help my process too.
Makes
It's
it
a bit of a
easier,
reframe.
right? Like
Yes.
it just like
Yes.
work is easier, and actually from the efficiency mindset, which
Yeah.
I know can be a pro and a con. I tell my team all the time. I always sort of want to go to the quickest route because I can see it, but I know we have to change, or we have different perspectives and whatnot. So it's really
Yes.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Yes. And so for you, maybe it actually makes more sense to go through my checklist because then we're going to
Yeah.
get to that end result. And you know that's the only way we're going to get there. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Well, I like it too because it sounds like if I am leading a meeting, I can get some practical tools where I want to touch on something that will hit everybody in those
Mm-hmm.
different areas or different categories. So I want to make sure I touch on something just with the,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think if
Um,
you, that's sort of the way, like if you think of these really broadly, it's not a perfect, there is perfect science behind it. That's not what we're doing. We're just looking at it broadly. Okay, process, people, performance. How am I meeting all of those drivers in what
mhm,
I'm doing? It's sort of like when you think about, okay, how do we bring the introverts and the extroverts
mhm,
to
mhm,
contribute, right? It's the
mhm,
same kind of thing, like just being able to make sure you're touching on those three drivers, making it
mhm,
accessible to everyone.
mhm, mhm. So I know you said that this is really used, I mean, you're using it in work, but I think like a lot of things, as you were describing things, I'm thinking there's, I mean, you can certainly use it within personal life to identify what's important to people and again, maybe why conflicts arise. And I'm curious, like if somebody's thinking, okay, how can I, immediately integrate this into what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, both personally and professionally? What would you say are some things that they can do to integrate these right away?
Yes. So without doing the assessment, which is great,
Mhm.
but you can just equally use this without it. Um, I think having an understanding of what it looks like when someone's oriented towards people or performance or process, doing
Mhm.
some reflection on yourself and which one do I most relate to? And then you can ask people when you're talking to them too, or reflect on your experiences with them. Like, what kind of work do they seem to get really engaged in? What sort of things seems to trigger conflict? Having those conversations is great, but if you've worked with someone enough, you can probably start to get a sense
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah.
I would say, I'll give you some tips. I'll go through some of the features of each of the driver. And then I think it's really just about asking those questions. It's like, where do I think I'm at? Where do I think
Mhm.
they're at? And then setting a goal for how to approach that work. But I'll start with the different drivers. And so for a people driver, people who are more motivated by that people driver, they have this desire to help others and build rapport. They're motivated by protection and growth of others. They value forgiveness. They like when their help is valued. They're the helpers. Um, you might observe them giving people the benefit of the doubt more often, maybe deflecting thanks a little bit, defending other people, being more humble and ensuring other people are reaching their potential. And they might be triggered into conflict by negativity, people not accepting their help, or behavior that appears rude or unkind.
Mhm.
And so it's really helpful. You might say, oh, yep, I'm starting to resonate. That resonates for me. Or you can think of people on your team like that. And really helpful communication tips for people who are people oriented um, is to give recognition, but privately. Allow time for people to discuss their feelings, or even that check in that I mentioned as an example, check in on how people are doing, and show that you are seeking others' input. So that's the people driver. For performance, those people who are motivated more by performance are more assertive, they're more directing, they really value that task accomplishment, decisive action, seeking to maximize opportunities, um, and care about moving things forward towards the outcome. You might see them as very decisive, maybe even a bit risk taking. And
Mhm.
their conflict triggers are going to be like the perception that we're wasting time or that we're being interrupted or there's an overly bureaucratic process. You can see how the process and the performance people might actually conflict there, right? Indecision, those are going to be conflict triggers. And to communicate better with people who are more performance oriented, it's helpful to have really clear time frames, produce the relevant facts for action, focus on resolving the issue and moving forward, and really getting to that final result. And then for the process people who are more analytic, more autonomizing, really orderly, they like that structure, detail, pragmatism, fairness. They really value autonomy and self-direction, and they care about those principles and policies and procedures. So um, you might see them double checking facts and figures, or um, being more serious and managing emotion, trying to create order. And so they might be triggered into conflict by disorder or chaos, right? Chaos might be really challenging for the process people. Um, or someone minimizing their logic, saying like, "Oh, that doesn't matter. Let's not worry about the details."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Seeing
I'm
some nods, like just
Well, yeah, because I'm the sort of person like if somebody is questioning, like, and suddenly checking the facts and figures, I'm like, well, I've checked these, like, it's okay. But if I can understand that that's just somebody's natural inclination, it's not nothing to do with
yeah,
me personally, they're going to be doing that with everybody that they encounter. That just that's a good to know. That makes me go,
yes,
oh, okay, that's how Jane that's how she's making sense of things. And I'll have that
yeah,
information ready for Jane and I'll be able to answer those questions to give her
yes.
comfort.
Being
Yeah.
prepared, and it's not that you
Yeah.
overindulge, right? It's just like, oh, I'm going to give you a bit more time. You might need a bit
Yes.
more time to respond. I'm going to give you a heads up.
Yes.
These are the questions that are coming. Whereas someone else might be like, don't bother me with emails before the meeting. Let's just do it in the meeting. That's more performance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
I mean, it just really is, as you're talking about meetings, but I also think about how it relates to, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's just running inclusive meetings and holding space for different personalities who might need more time, whereas you have some people who just jump in and start brainstorming. So,
Yes.
really, really interesting how this kind of ties in. Um, we are coming to a bit of a close here with
Yeah.
our time, but we like to always ask our guests, because we are huge podcast and book lovers. Are there any books or podcasts you recommend on this topic? So this is a sort of a two-part question. So on
Mhm.
the topic, and then more generally, what kind of books or podcasts are you reading or listening to now?
Great. Okay. Dangerous question for when we're closing out, but yes. Not on this particular topic. I actually think you can go to the website Core Strengths, great
Okay.
resources to download.
Okay.
So for those who don't like the 50,000 page memo, it's great, just really short. But a book I recommend on work relationships is Radical Candor by Kim
Mm.
Scott. Are you both
Mm-hmm.
have seen the
Oh,
nods?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, right? I
Yes.
mean, a former colleague of mine from my in-house world introduced me to it, and it is very aligned with this approach of relationship
Oh, interesting.
intelligence.
Yeah.
And I use it and teach it for feedback as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's really just like everyday feedback to build honest relationships by both caring personally, right? That's the relationship part of
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mm-hmm.
but also challenging directly and being direct. So that's the efficiency part of it. So I see it as very aligned with the relationship intelligence model. And I also loved a book called Purposeful Empathy by Anita Novak. She's a professor at McGill, and talks about using empathy in, at work and personal relationships, and also at organizational and beyond levels. Great one. But I really love when people actually don't read the business and management books and get into um, memoir and fiction, because I think for perspective taking and developing empathy, hearing other people's stories, and even fiction, right? Like it's developed from truth somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Being able to take those other perspectives, read stories about people who have different experiences from us, I think that is great perspective and taking an empathy training, and also really enjoyable and connecting. Like we remember that we're all people, not just tools to achieve results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And it takes it back to what you were saying is one of the things that's so important to you, which is connection.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And so thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us. I'm so excited by everything that you've described. And I'll probably be one of those people, and Steph, I suspect you might be too, who actually goes and does the giant
You got it.
assessment to
Oh,
determine.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
excited to do
absolutely.
that. And Rebecca, we can post on our, when we post the podcast, we'll post your website so people can get in touch with you if there's some coaching
Sure.
work. And then also we can post the assessment, a link to where people can find out more information about this as well. But
Great.
yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So much interesting. I learned so many new things today, and I'm very
Mhm.
excited. So thank you
Wonderful.
very
It was
much.
Yeah,
really fun for
thanks.
me to be with you both.
Oh,
Thanks, Steph. Thanks,
All
Judy.
right. All
thank
right. Well,
you.
have a great day. Thank
Until next
you.
time.
Bye bye.